This is the Town of Washington Historical Society meeting, not the Dutchess County Historical Society meeting, as I previously stated. 7:30 p.m. at the Lyle Memorial Federated Church Gathering Room in the village of Millbrook, New York. And our guest speaker tonight is Aine Met-Allen, and he is going to talk about the Humble Pathways of the Algonquin. The guest speaker is Pritchard, and he will bring us the story of the Algonquin people, a culture that once flourished which is now the Hudson Valley.
So wonderful turnout. Before we step into it, I just want to say that we are going back in time tonight, way back in time, further than we typically do, I think, during these evening meetings. And you have to imagine the boundaries of the village of Millbrook have disappeared, and the Thorn Building is not there yet, and the Tribute Gardens doesn't exist, which anchors our village at this point. The railroad hasn't yet come through, and even all the mills along the east branch of the Wappingers aren't there yet. What we do see are, just imagine the landscape, mixed woodlands and streams and major tributaries, Wappinger in particular, wet meadows, and we see routes going through this area. They go north, they go south, they go east and west from here. They're major routes that are being used. And we also see a culture of people living in this area. These people are belonging to the Algonquin Nation, and probably in this area they're Wappinger Indians. That's what we're going to learn more about tonight. But they have a very rich life of language and customs and spirituality. They have terrific abilities at diplomacy, and their expertise in trade occurring along these routes. And now we can jump to the present time. Every day we trace these paths that were once walked by those Native Americans, and they're no longer visible to us, but we, I think, are most of the time unaware of the impact that they left in our lives and the blueprint, really, that was laid down before us on the routes and the place names that we might often say sounds like, it's a Native American name, but I don't know the history behind that at all. Terrific. And also the legends. These people lived in the same scenic Hudson Valley that we live in, a very rich area. We know that from our own living here. But they had legends, and they lived to the mountains and to the great waterways, and they had their legends and the history and the culture within the Hudson Valley also. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Edwin Pritchard, who I'm very excited to welcome here. He is of Micmac descent himself, which is of the Algonquin Nation, and he teaches Native American Studies at Marist College. And let's see, we have a whole list. He's a man of many talents. He doesn't want to go into that too much, but also he's a founder and director of the Algonquin Center for Algonquin Culture. Yes, okay. Which I hope he tells us more about tonight. If you will. He's also author of 2 books in particular and more. His most recent is Native New Yorkers, which is a terrific book, which I hope you'll all take a look at tonight. And they are both on sale here, the 2 books that we have in the bookstore. And also, I just found out 2 weekends ago that he put on, just 2 weekends ago, he put on a one-man play, a monologue, called The 11,000-Year-Old Man, over in Kingston. So,
a lot of old jokes.
So,
Right.
Evan Pritchard.
You know, when I go to one of these gatherings, I never know if there's going to be 6 people or 600 people. It's the way it's been, so I have to be prepared for everything. I was thinking of doing a little workshop with a little circle and drawing on the board. You know, I don't know how well it's going to work, but we'll try and see how it goes. But first of all, I would like to say that this is Wappingers land. In traditional times, and Wappingers people in this territory. And one of the things I also want to say is that history, just as it does now, it keeps changing. It doesn't sit still. So every 100 years or so, the lives of people change considerably. There were some changes that were more important than others, and I do like to address those. But in the time we have, I'm just going to perhaps skate over certain things. What I've really been interested in, what intrigues me about this area more than anything is the lack of knowledge that is out there in the common popular mind. Among all the Native Americans, you always hear about the Lakota Sioux, and you hear about the, various the Shoshone, and you hear about the Cherokee, but you don't hear that much about Algonquin people. And so that makes Algonquin people all more interesting because, you can know something that someone else won't, right? But the Algonquin people is a very large group. It is actually a civilization by all definitions, except that they didn't build really tall buildings. Other than that, it's a civilization. Equal to, in every way, to the Cherokee and Sioux and some of these other groups that everybody has heard of. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that, like I say, the Algonquin are the least known of these cultures. And among the Algonquin, of this general area, New York State, are probably the least known of any state of a Native American. And then the Wappinger, among all the New York Indians, are probably the least known and understood. So, and among all the Wappingers territories, Dutchess County is the least known of all the Wappingers. So we have a marvelous opportunity here for exploration because Dutchess County is the least known, probably the least understood county in some ways in terms of Native American culture than perhaps in the United States, just a guess. But it seems to me that given what I just said, and I can back that up, this is probably the most exciting county in the United States as far as finding out new things. Now, I'm not encouraging people to run out and get a bulldozer and dig up thousands of things, because I'm not about that. I like to keep things as much as possible in the ground. But work has been done for several hundred years, and so the knowledge, little pieces of knowledge are out there. And what my idea was, instead of simply coming and presenting, as the outside expert coming in and telling you everything, I figured you may know quite a bit as a collective group about this area. Now, perhaps I could even say among all of Dutchess County, Millbrook is the least known of all the different settlements. And what happened when I realized was a newspaper article came out, and there's going to be a lot of people here tonight, I started realizing, well, this is not going to be a little workshop. I better really find out all I can, at the last minute. So I crammed, and I went over to the Dutchess County Historical Society today, became an official member today. So this is my bat mitzvah. But anyway, it's a great group. It's great to be a part of an ancient organization such as the Dutchess County Historical Society. And I spent part of the day in their treasure troves, just digging around, and I did come up with some things. What the kind of things I'm looking for is for my next book is that you might know is translations of different Native American place names, or the Native American place names of locations that we know by some other term today, and where trails were. Things like this are very interesting to me in terms of what I'm doing. And I did find some things out, and there's much more. The thing is that one thing that Allison suggested is that I take this marker and actually kind of mark up this virgin map here with all kinds of notations as we're talking, and that you might want to volunteer some information if you know locations. So we'll have a little school here. But again, this is a new kind of thing that we're doing, still innovative, and like I say, I didn't know how many people to expect. But one of the things I want to do beforehand is I want you to hear everyone speak Wappinger's language. It's really easy, of course. It's actually probably the most difficult language. It is different than any other Algonquin languages that are not adjacent to it. It is we have in the north, I don't have my big map today, but Algonquin culture goes from the Arctic Circle down to Cape Hatteras and all the way over to the Rockies and actually to the Pacific Ocean. And it's a very large and diverse group, and it's always been diverse. But the whole northern tier, all the languages are fairly similar. And the lower United States portion of it is the lower tier that's related to Lenape. So there's really two types of Algonquin languages, and in fact there's a third, and that's Wappinger. So even if you speak fluent Algonquin, Wappinger is very tough. Okay? But I'm going to make sure that before you leave today, you all speak some Wappinger. So the first thing I'm going to say is Werite Netis. And this means we are all good friends. And it's a good thing to throw in at parties, you know, and like one of your parties, you can say, Werite, you can repeat it. See, in Algonquin, you can repeat things that makes them more emphatic. You can say, Werite, Werite, Netis, Netis, which means we are very, very good friends. So that's always useful, especially when you're getting in trouble with somebody. You can throw this and the Wappingers people, who still do exist, by the way, and a friend of mine is here today. My friend Sybil is here has direct Wappinger ancestry. I always appreciate Sybil coming and bringing Wappinger's presence. But I won't ask you to come up to give a speech today, if you don't mind, because there's a little story to come. But would you like to come up and teach Wappinger? Okay, let's all say this. Werite, Werite, Netis, Netis. Okay, now welcome. So this is, by the way, the story about this is that Wappingers at one time, when the Dutch arrived, were spread all the way from Staten Island all the way up to Saugerties and Red Hook along the Hudson. And the language was spreading quickly. And like I said, it was very different than even Lenape. It was different than all the other Algonquin languages. It had elements of Mohican and Lenape and this new type of language. Okay. So one of the first, actually the first Dutch farmer colonist was David de Vries, and he was trying to negotiate with Wappinger's chief for some land on Staten Island. It seems far away, but it's how big this group was. And he was writing in the notes of the deed what the man was saying. He couldn't understand what he was saying. So he wrote Werite, Werite, Netis in the margin. Okay? And it was signed using, hand signs design, and then filed away, and then it got lost in what became the great archives of New York City. And then they made copies of it, and it ended up, a copy of this deed was stuffed into a box and then sent off to the Lenape Trailside Museum over by Cross River in New York. And it so happened at that moment, Nick Shumatoff, who does speak, is conversant in this dead language, one of those types of people, opened it up and suddenly there it was. He said, we are good friends. And what happened, sadly though, is that important message was lost for 400 years, and no one knew what was being said. So this is why it's important. We can bring this language back. Another thing that I learned recently from David de Vries, who's been dead now for 300 years, is Maruwit Rankantin. That's a little, see, you go more advanced as we go along. It gets tougher. Okay. Maruwit Rankantin, he learned from a chief in the Wappingers. It means, let us make peace together. So it's a good thing to learn if you're ever a chief. You can say, Maruwit Rankantin. Right? I'll hear you say that. Maruwit Rankantin. Very good. Okay, it's not every day that you get a whole tribe of people speaking the Wappingers language. Now, it may be surprising, but one thing that I'm at this point very sure of is that a lot of what makes Wappingers different from all the other Algonquins is that a large group of Caribbeans came up about 1300, and they were chasing the whales. There's a current that goes right up the Atlantic coast from Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo, and most of the people were apparently from Santo Domingo. And there were very few references, but just a few. When Chief Adrian Block, actually Captain Adrian Block, crashed in Manhattan, he had with him, as it turns out, a Santo Domingo Dominican native with him. And when he left and built a fort, he left the fort in the hands of this Dominican, from Santo Domingo, to deal with the Indians, because apparently they already spoke a similar language. Okay. Okay, this is yet one of many clues that this whole Wappingers and Canarsie Indian complex was all very much familiar with these Caribbean languages. Now, if you're chasing whales and you live on whales, you know they migrate. So in the summertime, they'll be in the north, in the winter they go south. If you hang on them, you're going to follow them when they go north in the summer. So they came up here. And the Wappingers people, in their language, there's many words that, in the deeds and names of chiefs, for example, they're in trade language. They're like Taino word, Taino Indian word, and then Spanish word, Taino word, Spanish word. And this is how they communicated. And so there's many examples of this. But you won't see this in books, not yet. But, this is things that I'm researching. So your Wappingers people who were here were a little different than their Algonquin neighbors. And very sophisticated. They had, for the ocean-going vessels, they had canoes that were just like the Caribbean dugout canoes, large, huge dugout canoes. Okay, so when they came into this area, there were Lenape people in this entire region and Mohican type of people, Mohican being, I believe, the older culture. And they came in about, I say, 1300 and pretty much took over and developed these, large villages and different roadways. And mostly along streams. And of course, Wappingers Creek is a system of creeks, and they all live, you can pretty much guess that they live all along the creeks. So, and we're not far from those creeks here. Now, one of the things that I want to show you, I've been working on this, and this map was provided to me by Allison, and I know you can't really see this, but this is a very close-up map of Millbrook. And here's Millbrook here, here's 44, and then it connects over here with 343, and it seems that this is actually one path. Now, they, of course, you know how they do with the numbers, they screw up the numbers, but 44, 343, and it goes through this pass here, and this is, Mutton Hollow, no, that's up here. Butts Hollow is up that way. There was a path there, but there's really not too many ways to get through this path. So we know the road went through. So this was an east-west path, as far as I can tell. This was one path. Now I'm also sure that 82 was a native path, but only where what we today call 82, moved. But Front Street apparently was part of this north-south trail, and then this Valley Farm Road was a continuation of that trail and connects all the way up to Pine Plains where it catches 82, right before Pine Plains, and then 82 continues on north. So we're talking about a very long north-south trail, but part of it is now back roads. I mean, Front Street, you don't think it was a major highway, and then Valley Farm Road is not exactly New York State Thruway. But this was the thruway, a thruway, several hundred years ago. This 82 was this important road. Now 82 goes down to Fishkill, and there it forks with 52. Now 52 isn't part of this county, but 52 also was a trail that went from the Atlantic Ocean through Connecticut through Route 7. I'm sure you all know this is Danbury. Before it goes to Denver, it cuts and becomes 52, and cuts across through Beacon, and then across the river right at where Beacon. But it's just south of Main Street. There's a little road, Walcott, and that cuts over, goes right to Broadway, and then Broadway was the trail going up, and it goes all the way across. It goes to Sam's Point, which used to be an important center for Algonquin people, and then over to the Delaware at Coshecton. So I call it the Coshecton Trail. Okay, so we're 52. The reason I'm telling you this, okay, why is he telling me this? Well, between 52 and 82 branch off right there in Fishkill near the A&P. Now the A&P wasn't there, but if you probably, like a couple people of you, because you're historians, know there's a rock there where the two roads split. Anybody, besides David Creek, anybody know what's there? There's a rock there. Now, the thing is you can't park there, so most people never bother to go up and look. They think it's a rock. Why are they putting a rock in between where the two roads split? Well, it's very important. Okay, underneath that rock, and don't dig up the rock because I'll kill you, but underneath the rock is the great chief Daniel Minna. Okay, he died defending the United States, which was about to become his country, but he never made it. He was killed in action while mounting his horse. The Queen's raiders raided and killed him. And he currently may have known George Washington, but he had, as a chief, he'd gone into fighting for the Revolution, and he died way down in Cortlandt Park. But they brought him many miles across many hills, the story, all the way to that place where 52 and 82 split. And both of them were very important trails, as I hope that I described. Why would they go through that much trouble? Well, first of all, this is Wappinger's territory. It's the heart of Wappinger's territory, this is Wappingers. And also there's a tradition where any great orator is buried at crossroads. And this is actually mentioned in my book. And a lot of the great crossroads have trees there. Well, why trees? Well, they're oak trees. Why oak trees? Because what they would do is that when they bury the man or woman, and they weren't that picky, the student leaders could be women, it's not unusual. They're called sump squats, and they were the women's great chiefs. They would bury them wrapped in bark, and they would put an acorn inside their mouth. I don't want to get too graphic, but if you're under there for a while, that acorn will start to take root, grow, and it'll split as it comes out. Now, I won't explain why it splits, you can figure it out. And it comes out to a twin oak, usually. Now, this is a sign that there is a great orator underneath the ground there, Mary. Why? Because the orators used to speak at crossroads. Why? Because that's everybody would know where to go. They didn't have radios, they didn't have TVs, and they didn't even have cell phones. But they would know that at a certain day they could go to that crossroads, everybody knew where it was, and there would be, their orator would give a talk. Okay, and so when when man or woman passed away, they buried them there at the crossroads. So that's why they took Daniel Linham all that way and buried them there. Now you can park at the A&P, and if you're really in good shape and you're quick enough to dodge traffic, you can get to that rock. And if you look at the rock, there's a very nice plaque there, and I believe that it was put there by the either the Daughters of the American Revolution, one of these, or military-related group, because he was considered a war hero of the American side, as well as previously the Wappinger. So there's quite a bit of there's a flag there and a nice plaque, and that is Daniel the chief of the Wappingers. And in my book, Native New Yorkers, I have a whole section on the lineage of the Min family. But I want you to know that there is that, that's where the chief ended up there. And of course, his son took over the tribe, and they went to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and then they went west after that. So that's just a little bit. Now, going back to, if 82 goes all the way to Millbrook, and then apparently it takes a leg, but it didn't in the old days. It went straight through up Front Street. And then you have 44, which has really become 343, that axis. You have a very clear crossroads right here in town where those two meet, right outside of town. There's that turn. And that's actually was the old intersection. And whenever you find these intersections, generally there's something important. Like, for example, in Brooklyn, how many people have ever been to Brooklyn? Yeah, I think some of you were not admitted. But in Brooklyn, you have the King's Highway, which goes all the way around, and then you have Flatbush Avenue coming across. And the intersection where there's two of these roads meet was the center of their culture, Canarsie culture, which is where Wappingers apparently arose from. And that's where Chief Sessions had his chief's house there, his hut or his wigwam or whatever. And that was the center of culture, that crossroads. And what happened when the Dutch came, they built the first Dutch Reformed Church of the Flatlands right there. Because the Flanders means flatlands. And they put it right on top of his house. And then they took the Canarsie grave, the sacred burial area, and they put their own graves over top of it. It's just unusual. So they're all down there together, partying. And this is what's interesting is that church is still there. It's in New York City. It's still there. So we have a similar crossroads here, and yet, to my knowledge, nobody's ever written anything on what kind of civilization or town or village may have been right here. So that's why one other reason to open it up and ask people if they've heard of anything or seen anything. So at this point, like I say, this is I don't know if you can see this, but this is Franklin Street. This is not the crossroads. It's probably down here, although there's some dispute. But this is the real 82, and it goes to Pine Plains. So let's talk about. We don't know, as far as I know, nobody has told me the name of Millbrook as it was in Native times. So I imagine it was a village here. But Pine Plains was Chicomico, And in 1740, when the Moravians arrived, I'm sure you know there were Moravians, the first missionary in the United States and Canada was right there. First Chicomico was there. And there was a village there before, okay, it was Chicomico. And in 1740, when the missionaries arrived, there were 16 large wigwams there with from 50 to 60 able-bodied men, which meant there were more men that didn't pass the inspection or whatever. And they also had the women and children. And usually, able-bodied men, when the colonists came to assess the size of native villages, what they were looking for was possible military threats. So they would count the number of men who could do battle. 50 or 60 means usually there's 4 times that many people there. So there were probably a village in Pine Plains, or 2 miles south of it, of about 200 people in 1740, which is very late for Wappingers' history. Wappingers started being killed off, frankly, in 1621. They started early, and were probably one of the first groups to disappear. There were battles and whatnot, and you read history about them. But they were driven away fairly early. And one of the nice things about hearing you say Wappingers is this is a language that's definitely not been commonly spoken since the Revolution. But anyway, Chicomico was this fairly large village, and 82, this new 82 that I'm describing to you, actually the old 82, goes right to that village. Okay. So what I have over here is I'm going to try to create with this, I don't know if you can all see this, but try to create a map. This one is at a kind of a scale that you might not be able to see. Now, you've heard of Stissing, right? Stissing Mountain, Stissing Lake. Okay. According to the colonial records, that used to be Teesing. Now, they don't translate it, but Teesing could mean a place of fire, but it's a mountain. So I'm going to see how this is a little bit experimental. It might not work. But let's see, here's Millbrook. So actually, here's Millbrook, here's Valley Farm Road. Okay, and then, 82, here's 82. This way, okay. And here's Stissing Mountain Road. So here's Stissing Mountain, and we call that Stissing. Okay, and then here's Pine Plains. Now, here's Thompson Pond, Stissing Lake. Well, here's the Wappingers Creek, and about here was the Chicomico village. Okay, and that's where the where the mission ended up. That's the north-south, and that continues. 82 goes all the way down. Okay, here. And here's 52 over here. Now, I don't know if you can all see this. But see, this is where Daniel Ninham's grave is, right down there. Can you see that? I don't know. Do we need a darker marker or something? Can you see? Okay. So is this visible? I'm not sure. Okay, so, and then roughly, here's Millbrook, and here's, I was driving on 44 today. There's a remarkable number of very old buildings that are there, which is just one, actually, I'm sorry, here, this is really the one I meant. Okay, this one, that's a mistake, right here. No, that's likely to happen. But this is the Great East-West route here. Okay, so the real crossroads was down right at the bottom of Millbrook as it is today. Okay, now there's a number of these trails, but we don't know the village name here yet. I don't know what the name is. Okay, now the general area, this is there are 3 tribes here. There's the Chicomico, which is here. And the overall name was the Wagashtanak. I'll put that up here. And that is for the tribes that are from Chitomako on down. And this is, it was where the mission moved was over towards Millerton. And that, I have to find the here's Millerton. Okay, so here's Indian Lake. Well, right on this side of the lake, right on the border of Connecticut, there's Red Hook. And Rhinebeck, you have, this is 308. This was the old Sapasco Trail, but it wasn't exactly here. But here's Sapasco Lake, and these were called the Sapascoot. And they were all over this area. They may have been Lenape. What's interesting is here's the city of Kingston. I'd like to talk about this point. This map doesn't show it. But you see where this trail goes right down to the water at Rhinecliff, right? Well, across here is Kingston Point, and this trail goes here. And this is the beginning of the Great Minisink Trail. So in a sense, this Sapasco Trail is an extension of the Great Minisink Trail, which goes to the Delaware River. And I'll mark that. Okay, now, many of you know that Route 9 here, Route 9 is a major trail which is called the Mohican Trail, and it goes to Montreal. Now, I always like to ask people, who built Route 9? That's the children. Who built Route 9? When they give various answers. And they say, well, the Native Americans, that's the best answer, almost. And then I say, well, actually, the deer made that trail thousands of years ago. And then at that point, the early Algonquins just made it into a regular trade route. And then it wasn't until just recently, in the late 1800s, actually early 1900s, where they widened and paved it over, it became Route 9. But it was a postal route. So that's over here. Okay, so there's actually, this middle area here is Clinton, Pleasant Valley, and LaGrange are areas where I really don't know much about it. And so I'd like your, offering whatever help to figure that one out, because I don't know. Now, this place also was called Sitchem, which is like Satchem. It means the place of the chief over here. And the mission moved there, and it's actually the graveyards of some of the people in the mission ended up over it in Northtown there. And then over place here is the Little Rest. I'm sure you know more about the Little Rest, because some of us get Little Rest, But I believe that probably was a village because there was a tendency to place villages along a trail at certain intervals where it was, convenient to rest, literally. And Chestnut is here. And over there was the what was going to be called the Nook, was in South Armenia. Over here's Armenia, and the Nook was over here. And at the Nook, they would do what's called the Kitikoying, which means, in Muncie, means he is dancing. It's their powwow grounds, was at the Nook here, over South Armenia. And one more thing, this Kent was Takgatbush. I know, some of these words are hard. Here's the town of Kent, okay, and this is Takgatbush. Okay. So there's some of the major local tribes. Now, in this map here, again, it's a little small. I thought we were going to have like 6 people. But I'll just hold up the whole thing. This will show, if you can see this, it shows you much of the trails and the Wappingers villages of this part. Now, this doesn't mean there's not villages over here, but this map just focuses on our local Wappingers area, the northern Wappingers. You can see there's quite a bit more villages that is located. Now, at this point, it would be good if there's anybody who wants to talk about some of their findings or anything they've heard in terms of village names or translations, any notes, I would be happy to see some hands here and anything, any knowledge that's out there. Yes, sir.
Yes, I brought in an article, and I got a photocopy today, because Gypsy Journal in 1965, and many of you remember Jim Safari. And he referred to, I believe, called Shattuck tribes.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar to you?
Schaghticoke, yes. Schaghticoke, or Schaghticoke. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now they are.
He referred to it as being pretty much of Dutchess County. He may not, I don't know how much research he did.
Oh no, actually, there's several people, including Paulette Morange. Paulette Crone Morange is with the Schaghticoke. She is in the tribal council, and she's been recently doing research into Dover. I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me. Route 22 is fairly accurately built on the old trail. So that's a very long trail. 22 goes to Millerton and on up here. Okay, this is all 22. You can see that. 22 is the trail. If you go drive on 22, you'll see sometimes old 22. That's closer to the trail, and there's very old buildings along the way. And because the colonists first came in, they were too busy to actually build roads. They used Native American trails almost in all cases up till a certain time period, because it varies according to location. But this entire area here would be Schaghticoke, and there's different ways to spell Schaghticoke. But this would be their home area, the Kent on the Connecticut side, and the whole eastern half of Dover is all Schaghticoke territory. Okay. So I'm glad you brought that up. So that's helpful. And I just learned that, by the way, so I'm really happy to share that. Do you have any other things you could add?
Well, only locally, Washington Hollow is where I was born and brought up. And,
Right.
I did bring some artifacts and were found on the family farm that I grew up on.
No, where is that? Where on the map? What road would that be?
It's about a mile southeast of Washington Hollow, junction of 44 to 82, in the very western portion of town, Washington.
2K headquarters.
I'm looking. You know what road that would be?
Right on the edge of Pleasant Valley.
44 and 84.
Oh, here. Okay, I see it. Washington Hollow. Okay, I'm going to put a circle there. Okay.
There's a rock outcrop near there on South Road that my two sisters and I used to go up to once in a while. The name of the place was Indian Overlook Rock.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that's only about a mile from my home, and I've been there many times as a child. And there's a cave there.
Okay.
Also in that article that I had over on the board, we showed a picture of it.
Now, where, in relation to this spot, would that cave be?
It's, I'd say, approximately maybe 3/4 of a mile southeast of the center of Washington Hollow.
So down here near the Taconic?
Intersection of Carroll and South Road. I don't know what's marked on the map there.
You know where Innisfree is?
I don't see South Road. I see Terrell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Hereford State Forest.
No, it'll be farther north.
Okay. In Industry Garden.
North,
Okay.
a little farther north, yes.
Okay, about here. So let me put caves here. Now, when we talk about caves, caves are very important. Now, remember I said that the Tabasco Trail is 308. It goes right down to Rhine Cliff and goes to the Hudson. If you cross the Hudson in your canoe, then you get out on the point there, and there's the beach. Okay? Now, if you go up the hill, it's Ponkaki Street. Well, Ponkaki originally referred to the beach. It means the place of biting bugs. It's true. And a lot of place names that are in the old Lenape territory are called Ponky something. For example, Fort Punkytown in Brooklyn, right on Atlantic Avenue. Anybody really into George Washington obsessively knows that he watched the burning of Manhattan from Fort Punkytown, which was the Lenape fort. And that means, basically, the Punkytown means a village of biting bugs, which means it's a flea bed hotel. And that's where George Washington stayed. Now, Ponkaki, the haki means land of, and Punky is the biting bugs. And that was that beach there where the point comes out. And the hill was where they buried people and some villages up there. So Ponkaki Street in Kingston is a Lenape word. It means what it meant then. So that continues that trail. Okay, so there was something else I was going to say about Kingston. And now, oh, the caves. We're talking about, has anyone been to Connolly Caves or Connelly Caves, or some people say? They're right on the Rhinedout across from Kingston, facing the old Rhinedout historic district. Anybody know where Towpath Island is? It's right in the middle of Rhinedout Creek. Well, there's these caves there, and those caves have been there, of course, for millions of years. But it's interesting. The caves are important to the Lenape because in 5000 BC, which is going back a bit, even for some of you, 5000 BC was where a certain time period Peck and Groove technology was developed. And, this was like the transistor revolution in 1949 we have here. Peck and Groove technology allowed movement like never before. In the old days, you had to have rhyolite and flint, jasper, and certain kind of nappable materials, as you collectors know, in order to make these tools. Well, what happened was at a certain point, some adolescent scientists figured out how to make tools without using jasper, flint, or rhyolite, or flint, which are harder to find. Peck and Groove, you just peck at it, and then you chisel away, and you can create a tool out of an old rock anywhere. That makes you very mobile. So about 5000 BC, there was this large population boom and migration all over, and people came up here. And it's about that time they were really living in caves and rock shelters. And, not to denigrate them and not to call them cavemen, these are actually very viable places to live. You're air conditioned in the summer and warm in the winter. You just have to get rid of the bears. And you can live there very comfortably. Now, any place where there's a good cave, you're going to have any intelligent Native American who's going to want to live there. Okay? And there was no aspersions cast on cave dwelling there. So people did that. Now, the phenomenon that happens is that going fast forward another 5,000 years gets you to about the year 1. And at this point, people are already starting to become nostalgic and sentimental about the old days. And so these ancient places of habitation become sacred. And people make pilgrimages to these caves in certain areas where their ancestors were from, because Algonquin culture is an ancestor reverent culture. It's similar to the Japanese and Chinese. It's very important, and it's hard to understand how important it is unless you're in that culture, is that there's an understanding, a tacit understanding that your ancestors are good people, they're going to help you, they're interested in you, and basically they're going to, when you die, they'll lead you on to the other side. And also that means that when you're going on your vision quest, that your ancestors will help you through that too. Also, pipes, the smoking pipes appeared in this area about sometime after 1000 BC. And the sacred pipe also relates to contacting ancestors. So ancestors are important. If you're going to go back to this cave where your ancestors live, you're probably going to want to make it a pilgrimage and have be of a prayerful mind, so to speak, and have your spiritual light on, so to speak. Many people, a lot of Muncie people, went to these ancient cave areas in order to do their vision quest. So this cave, I know today may not look like much because things have happened, like the Connolly Cave used for cement mining, and now there's a marina there. But be respectful whenever you go into a cave, because it's guaranteed that the Lenape people, their ancestors were there, and that the Lenape of recent times consider that highly sacred because of that. It's their ancient traditions have their birth there, just as we go back to Jerusalem. It's similar thing. You're not going to go there to party. You're going to go there to pray or whatever, similar to the caves. So it's important where these caves were, or where the caves still are. It's like, let's say, pointed out right here. It is along this trail. So that's really important. Do you have a comment?
When I was a kid, I went to those caves too. And wasn't it supposed to be that there were Indian drawings in the caves? Did you ever see that? I know. There were supposed to be Indian drawings in the cave too. But I'm not quite sure. I can't remember if I saw them either.
The cave was quite long and narrow.
Yeah.
It's like a big piece of rock broke away from the original and kind of laid tight to the 2 feet wide at the bottom, and you can stand up through it from one end to the other. It's kind of roundabout type of cave.
I know that cave you're talking about. It's like a big surface piece of rock slid off and slid down a little bit and made an opening. And that's the best way to get up to the top of that rock.
The picture of that in the paper over there, that rock.
Yes.
I just wanted to say too, about maybe 10, 12 years ago, Judge Morey who was born in Washington Hollow and grew up. He spoke with the Hearst Historical Society. He was in his 90s when he passed away. And he spoke with to our Historical Society about a year or so before he passed away. And he referred to that cave, going up there as a child, being grown up in Washington Hollow. And he referred to some sort of a hole in the rock where he said it was said that the Indians had put their corn in and turn their corn to get the
The holes that are in the article too.
to get the kernels off the corn. They
Oh,
had used.
scraper, yeah. They used a number of things for scrapers. I grew up with one of these in my household, and it's nice to have a whole one of these because my brother inherited it, not me. But many descendants of Algonquin people still have these, I believe, and I know our family does. They're pestles that pound the acorn. And the diet changed as they changed in different cultures over centuries. The diet changed too, according to what was available.
The frame arrowhead down by Rail Mill.
By where?
Near Rail Mill on the corner of town 50 and Town of Lagrange.
Okay. That would be over here. Do you know what road? Near what road?
On the corner of Vassar Road, 376 on the town. Corner of Town of Lagrange, below. Town of Lagrange, Town of Hist.
Okay.
Up higher.
Okay, here's 376. Okay. No, 376 is here, and here's the creek. It's Wappinger Creek.
That's the Wappinger Street, right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Rail Mills is right there?
Right. Yes.
They were all found on Staten Hill Road and on 376 on Torrance.
Okay, where the turn look for? Okay, well, I see 376 and Wappinger Creek, so we'll do that for now. Okay, so this was the arrowheads? Okay. So yeah, that's closer to where the Wappinger's Creek and the central, here's Wappinger's Falls, of course, is a central place, and where 9D meets with, here's 9 and 9D. This was one of the main areas. They didn't live right on the falls because it was said that the noise of the falls was so loud that they couldn't have heard somebody, coming if there was an attack or something. So they lived up the hill, kind of where 9D and 9 come close. But yeah, 376 parts of it were a trail, and I'm not sure if that area was or not. I think it was a trail. Yes, sir?
In Clifford's book, both on the 9 partners patents.
Yeah.
It was both on all of the patents there.
Right.
Anyway, he lists the patentees, but he also lists the Indians that signed off
Yes.
on that patent.
And I have that page right here.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me. It was intriguing because now there was a name, a specific name,
Right.
identifying someone who lived in this area. It wasn't a relatively narrow patent, so therefore,
Yes.
the chances are good that a couple of those guys, they probably tried to get a good representation of the Indians, so they went throughout the whole patent. Some of them probably was right here, maybe on Valley Farm Road that you mentioned where I live.
Oh, you live on Valley Farm Road? Great. Well, it's a great view out there, right? That's what I've heard. It's a great view.
Pardon me?
There's a great view out there, right? Okay. No, actually, yeah, I was reading that today, and I have a copy of it with me, of that page, because it's a lot of Native American names, but the actual descriptions are very hard to figure out because of the way they did it. But over in the town of Northeast is Wamunting. This is all from that page. A location called Wamunting, and north of that is the Tooth Mountain place called Weepating, and that is in Ancram, like south of Ancram there, near north of Pine Plains. And then there's basically those are the ones that I was sure about, and there were several others, and mentions of Wassaic, by the way, of course. Okay, so yeah, I did read that. That's a very interesting page. I know exactly, which one you're talking about. And so, we look for those little clues. Yes?
Between Route 44 and 343, where Little Rest is, 343,
Yes.
there's a hill called Tower Hill.
Right.
And when my family, Martinez and Conrad's family too, we all descend from someone back then, came in the 1790s. The story came down that there was an Indian orchard there, that there were big round impressions in the ground that they decided were Indian wigwams.
Mm-hmm.
So this would have been their Butts Hollow Road
Yes.
on the west side, north side of Butts Hollow Road. And so they're, whether they lived there year-round or just came, whether they were seasonal, I'm not sure. But I have a question about the wigwam. Some of the reading I've done about the Indians, I'm sure what you say, that the local ones built the longhouses, and yet I hear about the round wigwam ones. The different Indians build different ones, or was it seasonal, that they just built the wigwam, it was easier to move?
Well, the wigwams were like camping tents almost. They were that easy to move. But the longhouses were the main structures used by the Wappingers and the Mohicans, and also more and more the Muncies, and some of them were rather large. Most Algonquins, again, don't use longhouses. Most Algonquins generally just use wigwams. Okay, so that's one of the things that makes the Lenape culture different than the northern, or what's called the Bear people up north. You follow that? So the longhouses were used around here, and the wigwams also. And even wigwams were individual, fairly small houses for people on the move. And the longhouses could hold 12 families living together, because they had 16 in Chicomico at Pine Plains. They had 16 of these structures, but they had 400 people. So that's how many people in the one of these large structures. Yes, sir.
In the general area of Town Hill Road, I don't know if there's any significance to it, there's a series of stones planted vertically in the ground, maybe 15 feet high, so maybe there's 20 of them. I have no idea what the significance is. Anybody know anything about that?
Yes, I found out,
Oh, you found it?
because I too thought they might be something old, and wondered why my father never pointed them out to me, because he used to live up on top of the hill and travel up and down. The people who own the property at the top used to be the Youngs, and now the son-in-law, I can't remember his name. Swindell. Mr. Swindell put those there. It's a creation of his. I understand he also had some near his house. But he put them out in the field, and I'm sure there were many people who noticed them.
So we'll give you one. Okay, you have 343 here, and on the other map I had it, but I marked that. But let me see. Okay. Here's Tower Hill Road. Okay. So you said there's orchards there, right? Now you said on the west side of the road?
May I just come up, because I don't think I can, my direction is northwest.
Okay, here's Tower Hill Road.
Tower Hill Road, up and over.
Well, here's Tower Hill Road here too.
Right. This is where the farm is, and the description I give it is down
With the three circles.
here. And Bob Cole, did you have something to say about Butts Hollow Road, something being around that area? No.
Okay, now where is showing Butts Hollow Road again? Oh, here it is, Butts Hollow Road here. Okay, now I was told by Stephanie today, I believe, she said that was also tracked. So we're building our map here.
Mabbittsville on there?
Mabbittsville? Yeah, but I don't know if Mabbittsville was a village or not, a native village.
Very small village, just out of Nova here.
No, I know, but I don't know if it was a Wappingers village or not. I haven't seen anything. Anybody know? Yes?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't found any evidence that it was an actual Wappingers village. It could be, but I've never seen anything to back it up. So
Well, Martina, excuse me, I think you're talking about Hogsback Mountain?
yeah, Mabbittsville.
Mabbittsville and Hogsback, there's a hill they always call Hogsback. Evidently years and years ago, there was the Indians there.
Well,
It's just out of Norfolk here in Mabbittsville.
well, Hogback is on the map. On this
It
map.
is.
I think so. So here's Mabbittsville is, here's Little Rest.
Yeah.
So here's Mabbittsville here, and
East of that.
It's closer to Tower Hill Road.
yeah, here's Tower Hill Road. So it's a village there, you say?
Yes.
Okay, well, just east of Mabbittsville, we'll put a circle. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
When I was a child, I remember being on those gardens.
Yeah.
On the Arrowheads. And I lived in the town of Princeton, and it just hit me how long it was like less than a mile
Cool. Keep.
from Longview. I lived by Ocean.
Okay, what street was that?
So I lived in Sunrise Drive with
I can, Sorry?
I live on Tamarack Hill Drive, which is kind of a diagonal section of the Ridgeville Road. Ridgeville is along the rock.
Okay.
So it's actually right by where Tom Taylor is.
The Honda dealer?
Yeah.
That wasn't there then.
It's closer to Pleasant Valley.
Yeah, it's like right on the border.
Now, Poughkeepsie, by the way, this is another thing. The word, there's all these 49 different translations, but probably the most reliable is that it's a safe, sheltered spring, because Ramapo, which is not far from here, is in Connecticut, right where the states meet, I guess that would be. Here's Connecticut. So the Ramapo means a slanted rock, that poo. And so apparently that rock, there was a rock that sheltered a spring, and we believe that it was Spratt Park. You know where Spratt Park is, apparently? And there seems to be a movement to perhaps restore that and to, you know, within a park, but to maybe have some designation there to say that's where Poughkeepsie was named, because I, you know, believe it was named after that place in Spratt Park, and people could go there perhaps and get a little education, as well as a nice place to visit. So that's, you know, in that general area. I mean, Poughkeepsie was a, you know, Native American Wappinger settlement. The name goes back farther. Now, one of the things, you know how in this country we have places like Westchester, which that actually used to say something that in the old English language, you know, it means, you know, whatever, a borough or whatever that's west of something else. And in the same way, in the Native American place names, each of these place names has an age tag to it because of the dialect that these names are in. So that's another whole aspect of studying these place names, is that they tell you a lot of things. And once you learn the language and the history of the language, as you're going around, not only do they tell you this is the place where people sit down on the rocks by the side of the water and have a smoke, but it also tells you what time period roughly that was named that in. Poughkeepsie is a very old name. So it shows you that this place was important quite a long time ago. Yes.
I have relatives who live over in High Backville, and whenever we go over, it's like we're going to Walrus and never think. I'm just wondering about, are these also Algonquin? Are they?
Oh, yes. That's a whole other evening lecture. I have, no, they are. Oh yeah, it's in the book. But I'm doing a book on trails in these geographical locations, and that's the Mini Sink Trail is Route 209. It's one of the greatest trails in the world, really. And I have a slideshow where I have about 200 slides, and I go through, and it's mostly place name signs. So you look at the signs, and then you see the surroundings, and all the signs, sometimes they're in English, but they all refer to Native American phenomenon or were places where important things happened for the Muncies. That area is all Munsee territory, and there were 5 Munsee tribes there, 5 different Munsees, and Esopus Munsees even. It breaks down. There's a very, very large area. So all along Route 209, all the way to Port Jervis, and then actually down into New Jersey, every few feet is a important historical site. So you're walking on history, and I'll tell you a story. They're still there. You know, the Munsee are still there, but they don't tell you unless you already know. So I take people on tours of the Mini Sink Trail. And this one group, special group, I decided to take them to this diner. It was right on the trail because it was convenient, whatever. And it's right across from the old fireplace that's sitting there in the middle of the field in Carhansen, and where was it? You know, Carhansen. So we're sitting there, and the waitress comes up, and I look at her, and I said, "Oh my gosh, she's Munsee," because I can tell, you know. I spent a lot of time with Munsee people, and so I was kind of whispering to them. She's Munsee. I was very nervous because Munsee people tend to be, you know, the more pure-blooded Munsee tend to be very shy. You know, they tend to not want to make a big display. So I just whispered to my friends that were on this tour, and so she came back, and my friend blurted out, "Are you Munsee?" And I went red. I mean, my face is red. And she said that she was Munsee, that her mother's father's brother was Munsee, and then she left. And but she said, "Well, I'm not really from here. I'm from Awarsing." Well, Awarsing is 50 feet away. So when she left, my friend said, "Well, that was very interesting. How did you know she was Munsee?" First of all, I said, "Well, you know, you see a lot of Munsees, you pick them out." But the second thing was, he said, "Why did she tell you, why did she say that she was, you know, her mother's father's brother? You know, why not just say her grandfather's brother or her great uncle? I said, well, I mean, if you're Algonquin, you would know the answer to that because, you know, the lineage is through the mother's side, and specifically, you know, the mother's father is the clan system. She's still thinking clan system. This was last year, you know. And they said, so that means she's more Munsee than if it was her father's brother's whatever, because it's not through the father, it's through the mother. And then they said, well, why did she make this distinction and a very big deal out of not being from Kerhonkson, being from Wawarsing, even though it's 50 feet away? And I said, well, if you're Algonquin, you would know that Wawarsing was a different district. You know, and so the Kerhonksons are on this side of that line, and the Wawarsing's a different side of that line. And so if you're Algonquin, you know this is a big, you know, it's not exactly a different dialect, but it's a pretty significant difference. Different type of Esopus Munsee, you see. So she obviously was very aware of all these distinctions. So, you know, the many is Wappingers Indian, you know. So there's certainly not a dead culture. Yes?
Wouldn't the Hudson River be one of your trails? So much has been found in Bowden Park on the Hudson. Dennings Point is another place that's been dug up.
Well, that's kind of, okay, here's Dennings Point way down here. And that's where they're building the new river, you know, estuary. But yeah, there's the Route 52 goes right down near there. And there was a settlement there. There was a village at Dennings Point. It was a Waranet village, which is actually Munsee, by the way, and not Wappingers. But the Wappingers were the Matawan right across. Remember Beacon used to be called Matawan? Okay, Matawan. The Wan is a kind of a river. Okay, and Mata could mean like it was, literally means it's lowly. It's like a shallow river. I'm not sure. I guess it means the fish skeletons comes out there. But Matawan is one of those words. And you mentioned Bowden Park. Yeah, that's right. Here. And they're actually, Wappingers, they're having a center there. They're developing more and more Bowden Park into a cultural center for the Wappingers culture. I'm working, kind of doing some work helping out with that. And I have some compilations of Wappingers linguistic material, which has to be crunched through because it's all in kind of a scholarly form. But I'm going to try to create some material so that Bowden Park, they can teach people about the language and more about the history. But they're doing a great job already in terms of doing survival workshops and all kinds of ceremony and whatnot. It's a wonderful thing they're doing over at Bowden Park. And that's along that coastal route. Now, when the train went through, Metro North did more to destroy Native American culture than Custer because all the villages were lined right up along that corridor along the river, and the train just went, they built it right through. And of course, archaeologists went out there and did gather some of these things. Matter of fact, New Hamburg Station was the site, a very good site for flint and rhyolite that was in sandstone. And there was a quarry there when there was a village there, and all that went the way of the dodo, of course. It went up in museums and just thrown away, I suppose. And so they built the railroads through. And the railroads were especially destructive because they have to be pretty straight. You can't kind of wind around an insignificant Native American village, according to them. So trains, had their effect. I do ride them, but yes, you had your hand up in there.
I found most of mine in Hibernia Road and also in Stewart Air Base, Little Britain. Generations go through that area. A lot of things had arrowhead.
Is that 94? Route 94?
Yeah.
Route 94 was a trail,
yes.
And it goes through Orange County, and then you know where 13
right,
Kings
yeah.
Highway? It shortcuts Route 94, which goes around, and that shortcut was the old trail too. And let me explain a little thing about what's there on that Route 13, that Kings Highway. Anytime you see anything called Kings Highway, this is going to be historical area. And again, I'm not encouraging people to dig. I just want you to know where the trails are. But in terms of that stretch, there's two mountains. There's Scunnamunk Mountain and Woodcock Mountain. And there was a story about these two mountains, and the colonists got them screwed up. They were told that one of the mountains means a good place to build a fire. And so they figured it was Scunnamunk because it sounds very Native American, and the other mountain was called Woodcock. Well, as it turns out, Woodcock is an anglicization of Winniptikunk, which means a mountainous place, say a good place to build a fire near a mountain. And so when you say would-niktikunk, the T becomes soft in that position. It's a D, and then the N is nasal, so it passes out of, in certain dialects of certain people. When they say the N, it disappears because, you know, like in French. So would-niktikunk becomes woodcock. And so they thought the guy had a cold, so they wrote down woodcock, you know. So Woodcock Mountain means good place to build a fire near a mountain. And Scudamounk turns out to mean a very tall, slanted mountain, very steep mountain, actually. Is there other comments? Yes, sir?
You mentioned about the intersection of Route 44 and 82 as being part of the trail there.
Yeah.
That wasn't there about 100 years ago.
Well,
But the old 82 leads to where the monument is.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the intersection was actually a block or two further.
Oh,
You can put the language, a
Yeah.
block or two up that way. Where the monument is, there's an old 82 went to that monument.
Okay, now which monument are you talking about?
343.
Yeah.
One block further than where you're talking about.
Yes, okay. Okay, this is what I want to know. This is exactly what I'm, you know, the thing.
Block east.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I mean, it's not going to show up on the map here, but that's what I want to know. That is like,
That old 82 on that map, Paul?
I don't know.
Right
I
near
don't
that
think so.
intersection.
But it's a block east from where it is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
See the monument.
I'll
It's on
remember, that's on
343.
tape. We got that on tape.
Also, Evan?
Yes, sir.
In 1797, Jacob Smith did surveys of this area. Steph has copies of them too. But it listed all the trails, the main trails, and most of those were based on the Indian trails that were there. And the Historical Society has reproduced those in their yearbooks, so I'm sure you have those as references.
Okay, you know, I'd have to know the year though, because they
Yeah,
there's
I've
like
got
100 of
them.
them.
I'll give them to you later.
That's again what I'm looking for at this time.
Jacob Smith did a wonderful job and wrote down each of the paths and where the stops were.
Great, because you know they kept moving the roads around here. And I've heard rumors of these maps existing. I've never seen them.
That map he's talking about goes right by Indian Overlook Rock that we talked about earlier. And right now, present day, is South Road, called South Road. And it goes from the county Old People Song area, right down along that little brook, and it goes past Conrad Ham's old farm, right past Indian Overlook Rock to Washington Hollow.
From the south?
Steph's done overlays
Okay.
in the village hall, so you can,
Okay, yeah, I need to.
it's very accurate.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see.
Yeah, this is the area that, you know, you need to see that research. Yes,
You said that Scudamounk meant steep hill?
that's what I've been told.
Well, I've climbed it. It's steep.
See, we have proof.
Wait, pardon?
This is proof.
Yes, it's steep.
Yeah, it's very steep.
What about the name Poquague? It's in the town of
Yeah.
Brooklyn. It's the post office.
Yeah.
Isn't that Indian name?
Yeah, that's an Indian name, Poquay. Then the pool is like, in that position, could be like a shelter again. It's like Poughkeepsie, similar. The quag is often water, like a pond.
That spring, the Poughkeepsie Spring, I think I've seen a rock off of Academy Street that has a mark on it. That was the spring.
Really? Off of Academy Street?
Yes, it's in this garden area that they're preserving.
Is it Maple Grove? I've heard there's like two different places.
Henry Downing had a home and a garden. Springside.
Okay. All right. Well, I've heard there's several different places that people argue are the original spring. But we need to get, I want to get that data so, I mean, you know, somebody can
Are there
make
many places with pictographs? Have you uncovered?
No, very rare.
Because we found them in Putnam County, near Ninham.
Near Ninham?
Yeah.
Really? I haven't heard that. So we'll have to talk about that. Yes.
I grew up in Putnam County and in Lake Mahopac.
Yeah.
And
that Mahopac means bear flats.
Okay. And studying, you know, the history of Mahopac, Lake Mahopac, we were told that Mahopac was named after Chief Maho of the Wappingers tribe. I don't know if this is true. This is what we were taught. And he is buried out on one of the islands in the lake.
Canopus Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Canopus.
very creative. The good ladies of the American Revolution wrote that down.
Well, I doubt it.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a Mayan, a lot of the chiefs were named Mayan or Mayanis, and so it's not that different, but
Okay.
Wappingers often had this name among chiefs, and that's legit, but Maho, never really.
Okay.
There's all kinds of stories about Lake Mahopac, but one thing is true is that was a very good place.
Mahopac.
Mahopac.
Whatever Mahopac.
Okay, not maybe. But anyway, yeah, there was enough fishing there to support quite a large group. The Canopus actually came from further west and then were driven out of their hollow there near Peekskill Hollow Road, which was a trail, County Route 21. They left later on in the 1700s and moved to the Lake Mahopac area because there was quite a lot of fishing could be done there, and it was apparently the entire lake was circled with not villages but wigwams. So it must have been nice in those days. Any questions or comments? Yes?
Are there any existing longhouses within?
Well, no, there's a recreation at Mohonk of one they just built. But there are places where they have dug up very large, along Route 209, the old Missing Trail, within a mile, like on these side trails, they found some very large longhouses of the Munsee, surprisingly large. And some of them are like 100 feet long and whatnot. And they're just ruins underneath the ground, but there's nothing standing. They're not really designed for long-term use. I mean, they just never thought that way. Everything was always changing, and things would rot or fall apart, or they pull them apart, use them for something else, and build something else. They were constantly in flux. Saplings. Fairly different sizes of saplings, and there was a way. Actually, the women would bend the saplings, and women are built different than men, and I've seen this done among Native Americans today. The women have a way of bending the saplings. They're pretty thick, so they're hard to bend, and there's a way to hold the sapling like this, and you curve it around your hip, but a guy can't do this. Say, it has to be a woman. So she bends a certain way, and she holds it there very slowly, and if she does it right, with their hip in the right way, then it will never break. But you can bend that sapling very far over, and it'll hold, and it won't pop out of the ground either, because you dig a hole. But it's the woman's hip that shapes the rib of the the wigwam. Okay, and then you tie that one. You wrap the end of that sapling around the end of the other sapling, and you have a dome shape like that. So I've seen that done. It's actually almost like a ceremony in itself. So that's how they did it, not with logs, but with saplings. And then they'd cover them over with reeds or bark. Or one thing they did was they took elm bark. They used to have more elm trees. And they would take off the elm bark and they'd place it under water in a stream, and they cover it with rocks, and they leave it there for a month or two. And when they pull it out, that elm is like a sheet of sheetrock, almost. It's like a fairly large, flat piece of building material. And they're very durable in that way. They also, when they couldn't get elm, there was some other trees. I think the flowering magnolias or the tulip trees, I think it was tulip trees, they would also use in a pinch. Is there any other? Yes, ma'am?
Well, just a bit further afield, you mentioned the Kanasi Indians.
Yeah.
I was just curious, are they the Indians who worked on the skyscrapers in the 20s and things?
Those are Mohawks.
So why, well, this is another subject, but how did the Mohawk Indians get to Manhattan?
Oh, I can answer that. In the early 1900s, they were working on the bridge that goes to Montreal, which is actually a continuation of Route 9. If you take Route 9, you just drive. You don't stop, And you go to Canada, it becomes Route 15. And then it comes up to the St. Lawrence River, and it bends a little bit to the right, and then it crosses over to Montreal. And that same crossing is the crossing where the same Mohicans and Algonquin traders would cross hundreds and thousands of years ago. They would cross at that same spot, and that's where the road developed. Now, they needed a bridge there because they, were modernizing, I guess, 1900-something. And they needed, it was a very dangerous job because it's very windy right there, and they were still experimenting with large steel structures. So they said, well, this is very dangerous. Who can we get to work on it? Well, right underneath the bridge was the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation, and they went to them and they said, how would you like to make $20 an hour, or whatever it was, and those days it was a lot of money. And, you know, the Mohawks, give them credit, they're raised to be fearless, by the way. The mothers do not protect, this is part of their culture, the mothers don't believe in protecting and sheltering the young men. They let them nearly kill themselves, and then they fix them up, you see, but they learn to be, you know, very courageous. So they said, sure, we'll go up there. And it's not so much, some people say the Mohawks have a special good sense of balance. The Mohawks don't all claim that. They say, we're just, you know, too dumb to be afraid of the height, whatever. But they went up there and they did very well. They were incredibly successful and they built a bridge. There were some deaths, let's say. But after accomplishing this and building the bridge, they were already famous just from that one bridge as being iron workers, what's called high steel workers or steel skywalkers, steel walkers. There's all these different, you know, names for them. And so when they started, around that same time, Manhattan started to blossom as a skyscraper phenomenon. And so they brought all these Mohawks down, and they lived in Brooklyn in a big kind of a, I don't remember the exact street, but there was one street where all the Mohawks lived in Brooklyn. And they would commute over to Manhattan and build the bridges. And on weekends, they'd go up to Montreal to be with their real families. Okay, so that's quite a phenomenon. There's a display at the Smithsonian Institute. And you know the Mohawks built the World Trade Center framework, even though it was very revolutionary. And they were the first to report the airplanes that attacked the Twin Towers, because they were working on a building right next to it at the time and saw the planes coming and figured it out. They just knew something was happening because they had seen so many planes go by, and it was out of, they knew these planes were out of their track. So this.
George Washington Bridge, too, supposedly.
So,
yes, it's about time we closed up. But is there anyone else, Mr. Hoadley? Did you have anything to say about where you find here?
This is a path from the old village at Chicago, people who call it, whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
It runs down to Route 82 and across it to a pond. There's a Moravian map that shows all of that information. If you get into touch with the Moravians, they can give you the world information.
You mean in new, which location?
It's up near 82,
Bethlehem?
where 82 and 83 come together.
Okay.
Just south of Pine Plain.
Yeah.
You go out 83, you come to the town of Bethel.
Yes, Bethel, right.
That's Chicago.
Yeah.
And there's a map that shows where the Indians lived there. And it also shows the old path down to Route 82.
Okay. Okay. Can I have like 2 minutes?
Yes, I was going to say, if you want to wind up.
Well, maybe we can see without that, but okay. This is from the Dutchess County Historical Society. This is their map. Maybe you can see this a little better. I marked it up according to the key. So these are some of the major tribes and nations of the Wapengers throughout Dutchess County and Putnam. So it gives you maybe a little better idea. Now, this one I just kind of finished today. This is the family tree of the Canarsie and Wapengers. They have the same roots, and this is what I wanted to do. I'm sorry, the way they did this, they put this silly strip there. But are we ready for? Okay. Want to dramatically hit the lights?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
You need help
I
adjusting?
need to. I don't know.
You turn the.
Can it go up? Can this go up higher?
Sure.
Oh, I got it. That's that. Okay. I'm moving something. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, this is something that you're not going to see on TV. This is the family tree of the Wapengers. Now, the Wapengers people, according to the research I've done, seem to have one of the most hybridized family trees of any group. There are, obviously, there must be 20 different source groups for all Wapengers people. Basically, there's long stories and all this, but I'll cut it short. 1500 BC, you have the Susquehanna people with their broad point spears, and in 1300, developing the soapstone, which leads to, it was a cultural revolution that led to the development of Orient Point culture, which covered all of Long Island in 1047 BC. The Minisink people go back 5000 BC along the Delaware River, and they descend from Proto-Algonquins, and Proto-Algonquins descend from the Clovis man who came in right after the Ice Age receded. Laurentian people, that's all, in Clovis. Those are all Algonquins. And over here, and somewhere in Michigan, there was a central development of red ochre or red paint culture. I'm sure you've all heard this term. Well, red paint culture is all over the Atlantic seaboard. There's also red paint people in Ireland, and they don't pretend to know exactly what route they took to get from Ireland or before. But the red ochre people, red paint people, long ago, before 1500 BC, had a great center of civilization around Lake Superior in Michigan, and they are somehow antecedents of the Orient Point. Point Peninsula people were just ancestors of the Huron. The Huron were the ancestors of the Owasco, and the Owasco were also ancestors of the Munsee. Okay. Orient Point people out-hunted the land, and they had a devastating, starvation because of the decimation of the deer population. So Orient Point culture collapsed about 700, 730 BC on Long Island, and the Sebenak people, which means groundnuts, they were basically groveling for acorns. It was a tough time, as you can imagine, for the Sebenak. Okay, and over here.
Could you just stand on the other side here, that side?
Oh, why?
Of the table?
Oh, let's see. Oh, well. Okay, I'm going to try. Oh yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is the family tree. No pictures, but. So there's all these going on simultaneously, and while this is going on, you have this Caribbean thing going on down in the Caribbean, South America. The Incas go back many thousands of years. They're extremely old and advanced people, as you know. And there you have also Nahuatl people who have a vague kind of origin, becoming Adena, Mayan, Hopewellian, and Mississippian in a row in the southern Mississippian Delta area and in Mesoamerica. All of these contributed to the development of the Taino culture, which is in Santo Domingo and Puerto Rico. And you have the Quisqueyan people and the Siboney. Okay, so you have all the Mississippian made the Munsees different than the other Algonquins, and then the Taino influence made the Canarsie different than other Munsee. So, and the Unami is just a later variation of Munsee. All of these come together in a kind of a big traffic crash here with the Canarsie, all these different types of cultures and people all melting into Canarsie Wappingers culture, which archaeologists call class and point. Now this is something you may not have also seen on TV, but it's provable, and William Ritchie backs me up on this. Of course, he's gone now. But he says it too. He says it's quite obvious the class and point culture just develops right into Wappingers culture. It's right in the archaeology of New York. So I'm going to show you all these different people all have different languages. Now we don't know the language of any of these people really except Proto-Algonquin. And Orient Point we can assume is some kind of Algonquin too. This is Iroquoian. But Munsee, and I have a Munsee dictionary which I'm selling by the way for $9. In case you want to learn to speak Munsee, it's not the same as Wappingers, but it is the base language that Wappingers develops out of. Unami, see, Munsee is a very old and delicate language, and it tells you every noun contains a complete description of the thing in it, but it takes a long time. You remember, the Lord of the Rings, and they say the Ent people are having a meeting that takes a week, and then they only say one thing because if you're going to really say something, you really got to say it the right way. Well, Munsee is a little bit like that. Unami comes later, and it's much streamlined. So instead of saying, pass to me the Worcestershire sauce, they say, pass the Worcester. It's that, they get it done. And then out of that comes the Canarsie, mixed with the Taino, and with this, Caribbean influence. And that's what we have 1300 to 1600. And then the Dutch come in, and they tend to drive these R-speaking people out, or the Wappinger-speaking people, the Canarsie people. And one of the ways I can say that for example, you say, why do you think they're from Santo Domingo? Well, Coney Island is a word of the Canarsie, and it is well known that they said it means the bear people, and that Canarsie also means bear people. Well, Coney is not an Algonquin word for bear. The only people who speak this word for bear are the Dominicans, the Dominican Republic on the northern hump of the island, and they're Quisqueyan, and it's only one particular group among the Quisqueyan who say Coney because the others say Cori. So we know where they came from. It's very simple. Okay, and long story, but there's many dozens of examples like this. Then we need more of them, but what's building in case the Wappingers are basically very largely influenced by the Dominican Santo Domingo people. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. This is this is Manhattan. South Mechanican Village became Greenwich Village. And here's the Canarsie. This is Brooklyn over here. The Werepos are also Canarsie people, and their place is now City Hall. And here's, again, this is Staten Island. If you wanted to know, that's where the people were. Okay, now here's Brooklyn. Now here's that crossroads I told you about. This is Flatbush Avenue, which was a trail, and here's Kings Highway, and this was Ceci's chief's house and a meeting place. And there's the Nyack people, which means a point of land. They originally started out here at Coney Island and then Narryock, and then they were here, and then they moved up to Nyack, New York. They were Canarsie people. Okay, this is the overall picture of the area. This is Long Island, and this is Connecticut. And you see the Wappingers in green over here, along between the Hudson River over here and the Housatonic over there. And these are the language groups. So, and here's Orient Point culture that I mentioned. The red areas are the areas of Orient Point burials and culture. So it's quite a wide area, and it's mostly around New York City and Westchester in our area. So this is where the Munsee or Minisink people were during the 1100 AD period, which I mentioned. Class and Point is the Wappingers. This is where their main focus of the Class and Point phase, and this is basically Wappingers or Canarsie. That whole culture was all of one type. So I think that's probably where we should stop, because I know we have, got to wind things up. Okay. But anyway, I appreciate all your turning out on this nice day, and appreciate all this great information. And I know this was one of those experiments that could have flopped, but I thought it was very successful. So I want to get that tape, all the details. So anyway, I'll do the traditional book signing ceremony over here if anybody wants to, and make some more questions. Well, thank you very much.
I'm sorry we didn't have more time.